They stood in the doorway of the house I helped them buy, and my own daughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "We don't need you anymore." 3 words. 20 years of sacrifice, folded up and handed back to me like a coupon that had expired. I did not cry. I did not argue. I smiled, picked up my coat and walked out into the cold. What she didn't know was that a Christmas card was already on its way to her. One that would take everything she thought she understood about family, about money, and about the mother she thought she'd finally gotten rid of and turn it inside out. Before I tell you what was in that card, I want to say hello properly. My name is Elizabeth. I am 71 years old, and if you're new here, welcome. Please hit that like button and subscribe because these stories matter to me, and sharing them with you is one of the few joys I have left at my age that doesn't require a hip replacement to enjoy. Now, in the comments below, tell me where in the world you're watching this from tonight. I read every single one, even if it takes me until morning with my reading glasses and a cup of chamomile tea. Now sit back because this story took me 20 years to live and about 20 minutes to tell, and I promise you it is worth every second. I was born in a small farming town where girls were taught to sew before they were taught to dream. My mother used to say a woman's job was to be quiet, capable, and grateful. I believed her for a long time. I married young, to a man I thought would take care of me the way my father had taken care of my mother. I was wrong about that, but I was right about one thing. The day my daughter was born, I understood for the first time what my life was actually for. Her father left when she was 4 years old. He didn't leave a note, he didn't leave an explanation. He simply didn't come home from what he said was a business trip. I found out 3 months later, through a cousin of his, that he had started a new life 2 states away with a woman half his age. I was 29 years old with a 4-year-old daughter, $83 in a savings account, and a mortgage I could barely spell, let alone pay. I want you to understand something before I go further. I am not telling you this so you'll pity me. I am telling you this because everything that came after, every sacrifice, every long night, every meal I skipped so she wouldn't have to, started right there in that kitchen with that $83 and that little girl asking me where her daddy went. I told her he was on a trip. I kept telling her that for almost a year, because I didn't know how to explain abandonment to a child who still believed her father hung the moon. Eventually she stopped asking. I have always wondered if that was worse. I worked 2 jobs starting that winter. Mornings at a diner where the owner let me take home the ends of the bread loaves, and evenings cleaning offices downtown after the businessmen went home to families that hadn't fallen apart. I did this for 11 years. I did not date. I did not remarry. I did not buy myself so much as a new coat, because every spare dollar went into 2 things: her college fund and making sure she never once felt like we were poor, even when we very much were. She was a bright girl. Sharp-tongued even as a child, which I used to find charming, back before that sharpness got turned on me. She got into a good university on a partial scholarship, and I covered the rest by taking out a loan against the only asset I had. The small house her father and I had bought together, the one he left behind like it was nothing, the one I refused to sell because it was the only stability she had ever known. She graduated. She got a good job in finance. And 2 years later, she brought home a young man I will simply call her husband in this story, because names don't matter here. What matters is what happened. He was polished, confident, the kind of man who shook your hand a little too firmly, like he needed you to remember it. I didn't dislike him, not at first. I just noticed early on that he had a way of looking at our small house, at my worn furniture, at my hands rough from decades of dish soap and bleach, like he was doing arithmetic in his head about what our family was worth. They married. It was a beautiful wedding, one I paid nearly a third of gladly because that is what mothers do. I stood in the back during the toasts, in a blue dress I'd bought secondhand and altered myself, and I cried the good kind of tears, the kind that come from believing your sacrifice finally bought your child a soft life. Here is where I need you to lean in a little because this is the part where I made my mistake, if you can call generosity a mistake. For years into their marriage, they wanted to buy a house. A real house in a neighborhood with good schools because by then they had my granddaughter, the light of my entire life. They came to dinner one Sunday, all smiles, and asked if I would help with the down payment. I had spent 30 years building a small nest egg from those 2 jobs, that clawed together discipline, a little inheritance from my own mother, and careful investing I'd taught myself from library books because I never trusted a financial advisor who dressed better than his clients. I gave them $60,000, every bit of what I had saved outside of my retirement account. I did not think twice. My daughter cried and hugged me and said, "Mom, we will never forget this." I believed her completely. I want you to remember that sentence because we are going to come back to it. But here is something I did not tell them that Sunday, something my late husband's own uncle, a retired attorney, had drilled into me decades earlier after watching his own generosity get taken for granted by his children. Never give away money you cannot legally trace. So instead of simply gifting the $60,000 outright with nothing on paper, I structured it quietly as a private loan secured against the property, filed properly with the county, with a laughably low interest rate and no required payments for as long as I lived. A formality, I told myself, just in case something ever happened to their marriage and I needed to protect my investment for my granddaughter's sake. My daughter signed it without reading it closely. She trusted me. That trust, it turns out, went only one direction. For the first 2 years in that house, things were sweet. I would come over on Sundays, help with my granddaughter, cook a big meal, leave containers of soup in their freezer for the week. I felt useful. I felt loved. I felt, for the first time since that 4-year-old asked me where her daddy went, like my family was finally whole and safe. Then the husband got a promotion. A big one, corporate 6 figures, the kind of raise that changes how a person walks into a room. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening, the Sunday dinners moved to alternating Sundays, then once a month, then we'll call you. My daughter started using phrases I didn't recognize as hers. Talk of our circle, of a housekeeper, of a private school for my granddaughter that cost more per year than I used to earn in 3. I noticed the way the husband started glancing at my old car in their driveway like it was an eyesore. I noticed my daughter gently suggesting I update my wardrobe a little before a work event of his I was invited to. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that success changes people's schedules, not their hearts. I was wrong about that too. The final blow came on a Tuesday evening in November, 6 weeks before Christmas. I had driven over unannounced, which I rarely did, because I'd made my granddaughter a small quilt for her birthday and wanted to see her face when she opened it. I let myself in the side door the way I always had, the way they told me I always could. Your family, Mom, you never have to knock. I heard voices in the kitchen before I turned the corner. My daughter's voice and her husband's, and the words stopped me cold in the hallway with that quilt still folded in my arms. Her husband was saying that my presence in their lives had become, in his words, a liability to our image. That my old car, my worn coat, my simple way of speaking didn't fit the life they were building. He said his colleagues had started asking questions when they saw me at events. He said it was time to manage the relationship differently. Fewer visits, no more spontaneous drop-ins, and absolutely no more mentioning me to anyone from his new firm. And my daughter, whom I had fed with bread ends and worked 2 jobs to raise, whom I had handed $60,000 of my life savings without a second thought, said, "You're right. Honestly, we don't need her the way we used to. She did her part. It's time we moved on." I stepped into the kitchen. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe some old stubborn dignity that refused to let me stand in a hallway like a ghost in my own family's life. They both froze. My daughter's face went the color of old paper. I set the quilt down on the counter. I looked at her, and I said the only thing I could manage without my voice breaking, "We don't need you anymore." I repeated her own words back to her, quiet as anything. Then I smiled, and I want you to understand it was not a bitter smile. It was the smile of a woman who has just watched the last lie of her life fall away. And I said, "Understood." I picked my coat back up off the hook by the door, the same hook I had hung it on for 6 years, and I walked out. I did not slam the door. I did not cry until I was 3 blocks away, parked at a gas station, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I drove home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, because that is what my husband's uncle had taught me to do when the world knocked me down. You sit, you think, and you plan. I did not call her. I did not text her. For 6 weeks, I disappeared from their lives exactly the way they'd asked me to. No Sunday dinners. No spontaneous visits. No calls checking on my granddaughter. I imagine, in their new polished world, they barely noticed. I imagine it felt like relief. What they did not know was that during those 6 weeks, I was not sitting home nursing a broken heart, though certainly some nights I did. I was on the phone with the same family attorney who had helped me file that loan agreement years earlier. I asked him one simple question. Given everything on paper, what were my legal options? He smiled. I could hear it in his voice, and told me something I hadn't fully understood myself. Because the $60,000 had been filed as a private loan secured against the property, with no payment schedule but full principal due upon demand or upon any change in the property's ownership status, and because they had, unbeknownst to me until that very phone call, quietly refinanced the house 18 months earlier to pull out equity for the husband's new car and his country club membership, a refinance that, buried in the fine print, had technically triggered my loan's due transfer clause without either of them realizing what they'd signed, I was now legally entitled to call the full $60,000 due immediately, with interest, or convert my position into an ownership stake in the home itself. I sat with that information for a long time. I want to be honest with you, watching this, my first instinct was not vindication, it was grief. Because a mother should never have to use paperwork to protect herself from her own child. But grief, I have learned at 71 years old, does not cancel out the right to stand up for yourself. Both things can live in the same heart at once. I decided on the Christmas card. Felt right to me, poetic even. They had built their entire new identity around appearances, around holiday cards with matching sweaters and professionally shot family photos. So I sent one too. Inside, alongside a simple handwritten note wishing them a peaceful holiday season, I included a copy of the original loan agreement, highlighted in yellow exactly where my daughter's signature sat beneath the terms she'd never bothered to read. I included a formal letter from my attorney, notifying them that due to the refinance triggering the due on transfer clause, the full amount, now with 6 years of modest accrued interest, was payable within 90 days, or I would be exercising my right to convert the loan into a 22% equity stake in the property, recorded permanently with the county. And I included one more thing. A photograph, the only one I kept from that Sunday I handed them the check, the three of us in that empty new living room before the furniture arrived, all of us grinning like fools who believed love was simple. On the back I had written just one line. I did not stop being your mother. You stopped letting me be. I heard nothing for 4 days. Then, on the 5th day, my phone rang so many times I nearly turned it off. I let it go to voicemail every single time. When I finally did speak to my daughter a week later, it was not the daughter who told me we didn't need her anymore. It was a woman crying so hard she could barely form sentences, telling me the refinance had put them in a position where 90 days truly was not enough time, that her husband was furious and frightened in equal measure, that she had gone back and read the agreement for the first time in 6 years and finally understood what her own signature had meant. I did not gloat. I want you to know that because I know some of you watching are hoping for a scene where I stood over them triumphant. That has never been who I am. I simply told her the truth, that I loved her enough to protect myself the way no one had ever protected me, and that love without respect is not something I intended to keep subsidizing financially or emotionally for the rest of my life. We did eventually come to an arrangement. Not the 90-day demand. I softened that because beneath everything she is still my daughter, and my granddaughter still needed a roof that wasn't in foreclosure. We restructured the loan into a real enforceable payment plan with actual monthly installments for the first time in 6 years, and I did take a small formal ownership percentage in the home, just enough that no one in that house would ever again forget whose sacrifice it was built on. Her husband, I'm told, was humiliated at having to explain the situation to his own attorney, to his own parents, to the polished colleagues my presence had apparently once threatened to embarrass. I did not see that as cruelty on my part. I saw it as consequence finally arriving at the address it had been mailed to for years. As for me, I want to tell you the ending doesn't stop at the paperwork because that would make this a story about money, and it was never really about money. In the months after, I started doing something I hadn't done in decades. I took a beginner's painting class at the community center on Tuesday evenings. I made friends there, women my age who had their own stories of being underestimated and outlived their own low expectations. I started seeing my granddaughter again on my own terms one Saturday a month, just the two of us, no performance required. And slowly my daughter and I are rebuilding something. Not the fantasy I once had of effortless, easy love, but something more honest. Something with boundaries. Something that finally, after 71 years, includes me as a whole person and not just a resource to be used up and quietly discarded. If there is one thing I want you to take from tonight, it is this. Sacrifice is not the same thing as self-erasure. You can give everything to the people you love and still keep one piece of paper, one boundary, 1 ounce of dignity that says, I existed before you needed me, and I will exist after. Protect that peace. No one else will do it for you. If this story moved you even a little, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button and give this video a like before you go. It truly helps this channel more than you know. And I still want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and if you've ever had to stand up to someone you love in order to finally be seen. I read every word. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't ever let anyone convince you that you are no longer needed. Good night, everyone.